This was an astounding experience, related by a man whose integrity is beyond question.
For Horsley, the most chilling aspect of the encounter was the feeling that Mr. Janus was reading his mind. This led the Royal Equerry to a startling conclusion.
Horsley had said that the man was, no question about it, an alien. He believed implicitly that he'd had this encounter. I can assure you that he would not have recorded it if it were not so. By no means would he have made up such a story. He would have been frightened of being ridiculed.
Horsley later recounted the story in his autobiography, written shortly before his death, but the government file on the incident remains classified and unavailable to the public. Another leading figure whose interest in UFOs is recorded in the files is the Queen's cousin, Earl Mountbatten.
He was a great enthusiast about anything, and so it was a very exciting and a very thrilling idea. I mean, you couldn't have a much more thrilling idea. He'd always hoped to see something, and he never did. He was ready to believe anything, but he hadn't made up his mind.
One day, a bricklayer from Romsey, who worked for Mountbatten, had a close encounter on the Earl's own doorstep.
A workman coming up to Broadlands had been knocked off his bicycle by a flying saucer that had landed, and he had been sort of paralysed by a ray gun. He'd been stunned, of course. Extraordinary. Then my father got him to sign a written statement, because he thought, you know, if this was going to be true, it would be very important to have a witnessed statement.
The files reveal that Briggs offered to swear on a Bible that his story was true. Mountbatten was thrilled by Briggs's experience. However, Briggs soon began to embellish his story, adding that he had been taken on a trip to the pyramids.
By this time, there was a sort of lot of whispering going on round the back, and that sort of gradually came up to the front.
Briggs's tale began to unravel, and his lie was quickly exposed.
It was found out that actually the man had been terribly late for work, and had thought, now what excuse? Oh, I know, Lord Mountbatten's interested in flying saucers. I'll have been stunned by a flying saucer, which was a brilliant excuse.
There have been many UFO hoaxes, but previously unseen files report the recovery of physical evidence from a potato and barley field in Wiltshire in 1963. The Charlton Crater case has become known as the British Roswell.
He was on his way to work at 6 o'clock in the morning because he was a milker. He worked for Mr. Blanchard. He was on his bike going round that way. And that's what he said to me, you know. He said there was this great big bang in the morning after the huge light in the sky came down, and this thing came straight down, you know. And there's just this bang. He thought it was something coming down, you know, just a light. As though something, flames were coming out the bottom of something. That's what he thought it was. All it was just left the scorch marks in the ground.
Len Jolliffe alerted his boss to the strange incident, and they went to examine the alleged landing site in the farmer's field.
We found this crater in the field about 2 foot deep, and about the hole in the middle where you could put a walking stick down through. And the hedge behind, the leaves were scorched brown.
When we first found it, it was just as though you'd pressed a saucer into some sand. It was about 6 feet across, and it was just sort of a shallow indent. I suppose it could have been a foot deep from the centre of the hole to the top of the saucer shape. It definitely looked as though something had landed. What else would make this 6 foot across or 5-6 foot across saucer-shaped thing with this little hole in the middle?
We reported it to the police, then they sent out the army. When they came up, then they started digging to see what was happening, and I think they went down about 3 foot or more. They put a board barricade right around the whole area. They wouldn't let us near.
They shored all the sides up so that people couldn't see inside. And there was a big danger sign out by the front there, you know, keep out. They certainly wouldn't let anybody look in the hole. They had guards on the site all night, because otherwise, I mean, there were people going up and down the road and, you know, wanting to come and have a look. And they were digging from about nearly over a week.
The Charlton incident remains one of the very few cases that has ever revealed any physical evidence, but the Army were not forthcoming about their discoveries.
Back in the 50s and 60s, anything which was of interest to the Army or the Air Force or the Air Ministry, as it was then called, they did tend to be rather secretive about it. If they didn't know what had happened, if there was a mystery, they hated ever to admit that they didn't know. And that's why they used to occasionally put out really very silly explanations for what people had seen, which simply didn't fit the facts.
There have, of course, been stories of flying saucers and spacecraft. What do you yourself think of this?
Well, it's something that we've never come across before with bomb disposal, but we're treating it now as a strictly unexploded bomb report.
The media began putting pressure on the ministry to find some answers to what had really happened.
This barley and potato field at Charlton, near Shaftesbury, has provided considerable interest and bewilderment. A crater was discovered there the other day by farmer Roy Blanchard. Around it, the spuds and the barley had completely disappeared. Not burnt or blasted, just disappeared.
Do you think the Army knows what they are?
Well, I don't think they've got the faintest idea what it is, really. There's something very strange. I mean, it must have been something that landed vertically and took off again and left its marks.
After a week of digging, the Army brought in reinforcements who came equipped with the latest technology.
Detectors gave positive readings of a metallic object below the surface. Was some bug-eyed monster lurking down below?
I don't know what to think, but it's so unusual, we've got to carry on investigating because we're getting some readings down the hole, you see.
What sort of readings are you getting?
Well, it's the reading that we get that says that there's something metallic down there. Whether it's a bomb, we don't know. Whether it's from outer space, we just wouldn't like to say.
As a result of all this digging, they did unearth a fairly small object, which probably weighed, it was a metal object, which weighed less than a pound and appeared to be fused metal. They didn't place much importance on that. They said, well, this is just a lump of ironstone, which you could dig up in just about any field in the south of England. So we're not really sure that has very much to do with the whole thing.
With the piece of ironstone dismissed as a naturally occurring rock, the cause of the hole remained a riddle. Questions were even asked in Parliament.
They never offered any satisfactory explanation as to what really did happen. It's my grandfather, I mean, he believed it was a flying saucer, and I think we all did. There was just something suddenly landed in your field, and this beautiful shape, which was absolutely beautifully, you know, it was clear as anything, and he poked his walking stick down in the middle, and yes, I think we all believed it really was a flying saucer.
Today there are huge sections of the Charlton Crater case file unavailable to the public. Sections that will remain classified for at least the next 30 years.
Are visitors from outer space even now returning to their galaxy with a payload of that miraculous new fruit, the potato?